What's up, UX fam? How's your mom and them? Welcome to another episode of Beyond UX Design. I'm Jeremy. If you're new here, welcome to the show. I am super stoked to have you. And if you haven't done it already, please consider subscribing to the show wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you are a regular here and you feel like you're getting something out of the show, I would really appreciate it if you left a 5-star review. That'll help me out so much more than you can imagine. Not just 5 stars. I'm talking about a couple sentences too. Apple loves that stuff. So do I. And as always, thanks so much to Chris, Sarah, Kwan, Stacy, Radu, Megan, Andrew, John, Mark, and Kevin for all their support. And if you want to join those fine folks and help keep the show independent and ad-free, you can become a patron for as little as $3 a month. That's less than $1 an episode. And if you do that, you'll get some sweet, sweet perks for your support. And of course, if you think the show is worth sharing, then I would love it if you told a friend. And for more information on how you can support the show and help people find out about what we're doing here, make sure to check out beyonduxdesign.com/support. So I don't know how I came across my man Thomas Wilson on LinkedIn. I followed people, someone else. I saw a comment. I was like, I like this dude. This dude, he's got some hot takes. I like his hot takes. Thomas is a brilliant guy. We're going to talk to him today about what he thinks is wrong with the UX industry today, but it isn't all negative. It isn't all negative. We're going to talk a little bit about some other stuff, and we pivoted. We changed it up, and I'm excited to have this conversation today. And not only is Thomas Wilson proud to be an innovation design director, a human-centered service designer, a strategist, and researcher, he thinks the answer to what ails business is stronger customer experience and employee experience implemented with service design. Something I love, near and dear to my heart. He's been in Inc. 500 twice in a row. His client website startup is listed in Forbes' Best of the Web alongside Alibaba. That's quite a feat. His work has been written about in 2 different trade books and has won countless App Store awards and awards in employee experience. Thomas has done everything from CX to EX and UX and even advertising, design, environmental and packaging and industrial design. He's worked for the largest healthcare players, systems, retailers, oil and gas companies, and even the largest agencies in the world. He's contributed to work that supported the International Space Station for NASA. That is amazing. I need to hear more about that. Thomas has 30 years of experience, and he's not happy about what he sees in the current state of design in the U.S. today, but he's optimistic that we can change it and course correct, and we're going to talk a little bit about that today. So, Thomas, I am so excited to have you on Beyond UX Design, man. How's it going? Welcome to the show.
Hey, Jay. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, man. So I was going to talk to you a little bit about service design today. That was going to be the topic. And you're like, this is some boring ass shit, man. Nobody wants to hear about this. So you'll listen to the other podcast. He's like, I got some more stuff I want to talk about. So we're going to talk all about what Thomas sees going wrong in the industry and how we can fix it. But again, this is all positive. This isn't all negative Nancy stuff. We actually have some actionable things that Thomas thinks we can do. So Thomas, before we get into that, and I know I read your bio a little bit, but that wasn't everything. You've got a lot of experience. Tell us a little bit about you and how you ultimately came, I think, to realize that shit ain't right now. We need to change.
Well, we've seen a lot of huge changes in the last 10 years. And if we follow a lot of the same people, and if you listen to some of the stuff that is coming from people like Debbie Levitt, Jared Spool, Darren Hood, Nick Fine, and many others, some people are acclimating to the transition and what's happening. Some people aren't, and some people aren't really telling the what I believe to be the truth about the core fundamental issues. Like when we break down problems and we use something like the law of first principles, we need to get to that chewy center. We need to find out what's really going on. And I think if we brush around the periphery and just sort of piddle-paddle around these huge, weighty topics, we're not really getting anything done. You know what I mean? We're not making change. And that's what service design is all about. It's really about intellectual honesty. You know what I mean? It's of course there's the systems thinking meets the systematic thinking, and those are the 2 most critical things in my opinion about service design. There's lots of other buzzwords, but and things that we can talk about, but the real difference between the way the folks in Europe are doing service design versus how people in America are doing service design is service design now in the United States of America is largely under product, and it's being controlled by product design. Okay, so product folks, PMs, technicals. That is who service designers are answering to. As far as I'm concerned, in a perfect world, we would either answer directly to the business, work for some type of journey ops, design ops, or CX, right? If we had to be, fucking rolled under a specific group, I would say CX. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But unfortunately, we're working for product folks, and there's a lot going on there, and there's a lot to unpack. So, one of the biggest things that I see is this is there's several issues to really talk about, but one of them is this disregard for one of the most important research artifacts I think has been made in the last 30 years, and that was Sidney Yoshida's Iceberg of Ignorance. And the reason why it's important is what they basically unpacked, and this is like in 89 or 90 when they did this, but it still holds true today. And they did tons of research, and this research basically indicated that 4% of the problems that occur in a business are known by executives, are known by C-suite. So when we start to unpack that, we go down a layer or two, and we go to the managers, like team managers, journey managers. 9% of the issues that befall a business or an organization are known by managers, are known by team leaders. These are your principals, your leads, things like that. When you get down to the ground floor of the boots on the ground, that's where one of your failings and your issues are known. And so what that tells us, and the reason why this is so critical, is right now, because of product first methodologies, we are not leading from the bottom up. And we're not sharing findings from ethnography, from doing good discovery, doing good qualitative. We're not sharing those things up. What's happening is we've completely decimated design leadership, and what we're basically saying is that two layers up that I just mentioned, we basically got rid of everybody above the director level in design leadership in large organizations. And when I say that, knowingly, that's not an assumption. Like, I know this for a fact. I've seen it at two or three large agencies, two or three of the largest companies in the United States of America. And I've also, probably talked to 100 people that are saying the same thing. And they're DMing me because they can't talk out loud on LinkedIn because they're afraid. And they're saying, look, this is happening to me and I'm seeing the same thing. And the core issue that's wrong with that is what that means is the people who know 4% of the problems that are really the issues that are befalling the organization. Those are the ones, them and the PM, like product leadership, is who's telling designers what to do. And so when you see all these posts and things that are saying, there was a couple yesterday and the day before that I commented on, and they're basically saying something along the lines of, hey, these dark patterns are creeping their way into the website, and hey guys, and they're talking, it's a designer talking to other designers. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, I've been in that situation. I've seen that done.
Someone told that designer to put that.
I've done those dark patterns, and I promise you I did them to collect a paycheck. Okay.
Right.
So
yeah. It wasn't like the designers.
No shit.
Yeah, they didn't
come from designers. That comes from a lot. It comes from product people. It comes from technicals. It comes from leadership. That is not a design decision. So when people start harping on or bashing the designers for these types of things, it really irks me and bothers me.
Yeah.
But so that's one of the major issues is that not understanding.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. You threw out some things in there. I want to kind of dig into a little bit. The first thing I want to understand is, from your perspective, like, what's wrong with the industry today? I know this is a huge topic. You mentioned product first. You called out product first specifically. Sure. I want to talk a little bit about product first, and because ultimately, on the surface, when you think about product first, if you look at the literature people have written about product first, it doesn't sound very nefarious. It doesn't sound very bad. It sounds like a good thing. The idea, in theory, would be, we're building a product that adds value to a user, and everything revolves around that value to the user, and we're focusing on the product. We're not focusing on the CEOs or stakeholders. We're focused on the product and how it delivers value. But in reality, it generally, what at least my experience has been, when people hear product first or product led growth, they immediately assume the product management led growth, and
Yeah,
they ignore they ignore all that stuff about the user part, and that's
right.
always tends to be an afterthought. So I don't want to put words in your mouth. Those are just my experience. But I'm curious from your perspective. Is product led growth what's wrong in the industry? Is more than that, or is product led growth or product first a symptom of something more?
Yeah, it's a something of something more. And thanks for segueing into that like that. Because the thing is, if I wrote an article, a couple of articles actually, and one of the articles was why they hate us. And there's
Mm-hmm.
three, that's what it's called on LinkedIn. I know you read it,
Yep.
but there's three or four different research studies in there. One by Mauricio Manhas. He's a service design professor at SCAD, real smart guy. There's another one from Dr. Conglio or something like that. And then there's another paper. And all these papers are basically, and there's tons of these, but these were three or four really powerful ones. And they're about the systemic bias against creativity and innovation that occurs in not just the workplace, but it occurs in schools and it happens in elementary and junior highs all day long. And so people who are creative, people who think creatively and innovatively are usually subjugated. They're sidelined, they're silenced. And this is a huge issue. And so there's a lot of this bias that occurs towards people who are creative, the researchers, designers, people who are content folks. And so what's really happening with Product First is they're seeking to get rid of the leadership, which is the protective barrier, above designers that takes care of designers and makes sure that we're doing good work and we're functioning in environments of psychological safety and intellectual honesty. And what's happening is raging dishonesty right now. And it's happening from people who are very insecure about what they do or don't know. And the fundamental underpinnings, in my opinion, of why Product First is so dangerous is it posits that anything we do creatively is easily teachable with some books or templates. And I don't care if it's Eric Rice or Teresa Torres or Marty Kagan or the strategizer guys, the strategizer folks. What they basically are saying is in my opinion, this is like selling crack to school children. What they're doing is they're basically saying that you can be creative, you can be an excellent researcher. All you need is some templates and a book. You just need to do what I'm doing. And what's really wrong with Teresa Torres' notion of continuous discovery is it isn't discovery, it's requirements gathering. If you've already established that the output is a website or an app, you are not doing discovery. Discovery
Right.
is learning about people. It's learning
Yeah.
about people, learning about what they want in a specific scenario or need or what's failing them. It's about studying people and understanding people. Okay. Once you start getting into that, that's generative, right? Once you start getting into evaluative, once you've built something, a website or an app, that's when you start getting into more evaluative and validation. But if you are already working for a specific product and you're going to ask questions, you're basically asking questions of those users to create features, like a feature farm for the product that you're working on. So
Right.
that's not discovery. That's
Yeah.
that's requirements gathering. And
Yeah.
so that's one of the things that bothers me. The other thing, this notion that somebody like you or I could be born with design, with talent. You're drawing, you're singing, dancing, playing an instrument, something as a child. You grow up to go to art school or design school, and you have some type of skills. You have hand skills. You can draw. You're a systems thinker. Maybe even you're neurodivergent. And this is an unpopular topic, but maybe the way that your particular mental model works and your brain works is
Hmm.
it allows you to be a visual thinker and to be a systems thinker. And this is the case for many autistics. And so what we're doing basically is we're denying all of those things. We're denying mental models. We're denying women. In this business, we are. And it's a fact. And
Yeah.
so I think that they're doing this out of fear. And this idea that they're doing it and the people who are behind it are technicals. They're either failed technicals because they can't write code very well, because that's what the majority of most PMs are. They're failed technicals, or they're failed designers. They weren't very good at it. So they're in this PM role now, and they're functioning as mini CEOs. And what they're doing is they're getting designers and people to bake their ideas into products and services. So you mentioned product-led growth a second ago. So let's back up for 2 seconds and talk about that. The problem with calling everything a product is serious to me, because an organization, a large company, you're at GE. I've been at United Healthcare, at AWS. I've been at very large organizations. These organizations don't crank out MVPs. Are you kidding? Especially if they have established users, they're not making goofy skeleton prototypes with
never
5 features in them. They're not doing that. And this notion that everything should be startup culture and it should be speed to delivery, and you're just making junk is bad. Calling everything a product is bad. And the reason is we live in a service economy. Everything that we provide in an organization is a service to somebody. It serves their job to be done. It serves whatever it is that their unique need is, and whatever their utilitarian need is. Nobody comes to your website because they like you. Nobody uses your app because they like you. They're using it to get a job done, and we're providing them a service. So if everything is a service, and we know that software is a service, hence the acronym SaaS, right? Why do we keep doubling down on product? And one of the things that you mentioned was like explaining service design. Morgan Miller, who's someone that I really like a lot and is super smart, practical by design. He came up with this graphic that basically indicates usability occurs in this very small micro area, then user experience. Outside that is the service experience. Outside of that is the strategy for the business, and outside of that is the business strategy as a whole. And marketing and branding and positioning and everything falls in there, as you see. But across the board, understanding that usability is micro design. It is service design. It is not service design. It is surface design. When you start talking about, working in Figma, you're talking about doing UI, and you're talking about doing interfaces and making buttons and design systems and things like that. And the reason why it's super problematic for product folks and IT folks to be telling those people what to do is we're disregarding the natural order of how all things are created and designed and then built. For instance, I'm going to give you several for instances. Number 1, architecture. An architect considers the space, the job, whatever it is. It doesn't matter if it's a house or a building. They consider it. They draw it up. They get into AutoCAD. They draw some elevations. They do some sketching. They start to, design things after they've, done some fact finding and discovery and had some charrettes and learned about, what it is that they're going to go do. After that, a designer gets a hold of it, and a designer starts to pick out materials and starts to look at, what's the tile going to look like? What are the fixtures going to look like? We need some paint chips. What color are we going to paint this house inside and out, right? So after that, they make a prototype. All this stuff happens for months and months, sometimes years. Okay. And by the time it gets to the person who's going to look at the permits and make sure that you can build successfully and all this other stuff and doing some of that work, a lot of work has been done, but it's moving down an assembly line of creation, right? And so by the time we get to the job foreman, which is what a PM is, they're running and maintaining and managing the trade workers. What are the trade workers? Those trade workers are the plumbers, the sheetrockers, the ones
actually building the thing and actually nailing the hammers, right?
Thing. But you better believe every single person listening to this podcast, including yourself right now, if you were to go hire an electrician and a plumber and a carpenter to go redo your kitchen or your bathroom with no plans and no design, and you don't know what tile, you're going to have a problem. You're going to have a huge problem, and they're going to make garbage.
We'll iterate.
They're going to make garbage, and that is what's happening right now in a product theater near you. They're disregarding the architecture part, they're disregarding the designer part, and they're suggesting that the job foreman and the trade workers at the end of the process should be running all of it, and they should keep creeping up the funnel to the beginning. Now, we just talked about architecture. I want to establish this notion, okay, by using others, right? It doesn't matter if it's industrial design. Let's talk about cars, okay? So the person who sketches the car and starts to figure out what they want to make it look like, the person who gets the giant blob of brown clay and starts to shape the model of the car is not the same person that puts the fender wells on. It's not the same person who rivets the chassis together on the assembly line. It's not the same person. And so this idea that everybody should be, that you're going to start with the Figma designer, the UI designer, and you're going to get them to do all that other stuff is so ass backwards. It's ridiculous.
So one of the things that that drive me crazy about product-led growth, I think, is just one, it's the name of it drives me kind of crazy. And I think at a very high level, I think the words that we use matter. And when we say product-led growth, product first, all these things, we're making the assumption that product is the answer, that a product is the answer. And to your point about everything being a service economy, right? It's a service. What if the answer is not a product? What if it's a phone call?
Oh, shit.
What if it's something else? What if it's a text message? Like, that doesn't necessarily have to happen inside of a product. And when we say product-led, product first, we assume we have a hammer, everything's a nail. Every problem is a nail.
That's right.
And so the language that we use, I think, ultimately matter. And when you give the ultimate say over everything, the person running the product has ultimate say over everything. That, I think, ultimately is how we ended up here. Yeah. So, I'm curious from your perspective.
We just created
a bunch little fiefdoms. I use like fiefdoms. When we have these little fiefdoms, they have their own little budgets, their own little kingdoms, their own little armies, and you can't, you can't encroach on my turf. That's my land. We're gonna go to battle. Right. And I've seen that so often when you've got multiple products. And what happens when a service jumps across product? And I see this all the time, especially in enterprise, where I'm a customer and I got to use this product, that product, and that product. And instead of having some seamless thing where I can do my job as a customer, someone doing work, I have to log into that system, do that thing, copy and paste, go into this other system, copy and paste. Instead of having those teams in the background understanding that job to be done, persona, whatever you might want to call it, and understanding that the service is there and the products are irrelevant to that service, and the customers couldn't care less. That's the thing. They don't care. They couldn't care less what product manager owns a thing or doesn't.
Customers don't buy your code stack. They don't give a shit about how you built that thing. They just want it to work and solve their particular problem. And you said a whole lot in that statement, and you're 100% correct. When you look at like a business, just what you said, supply chain, value chain, what's your customer service like? What's happening in your call centers? Because service design addresses all that. Your voice. Right. Sometimes, when you have these different LOBs and you have silos, and each one of those PMs that you're talking about is basically like a little mini Hitler or a mini Napoleon. They're like a little tyrant. Each one of those people, they have different writers, different voices. And so what ends up happening is the messaging that you get in your email sent to you as a member or a customer for something is different than the messaging on the website. It's different than what's in the app. Right. It's different than the stuff you get in the mail. And the crazy thing is the majority of the things that ail a business are not in your website or your app. It's in how you're doing business. Right. It's in how the business is built, designed, run. It's that understanding your North Star. What are you going to be in 4 years? What are you going to be in 5? Where do you see this industry going? And do you have plans for change? That's all design. That's all service design, and that's all research, and it's all required. And if you look at what Mark Cuban just did with Mark Cuban Cost Plus Drugs, this is a guy who owns the Mavericks. He's owned lots of tech businesses. And what he did is he just took a supply chain that was convoluted and he removed pieces from it and made it simple and Occam's razor. That's basically what he just did. And if you know anything at all about service design, that is 100% a service design activity. What he
Now
did.
Yeah, I love that. Now, the thing that drives me crazy, you just said that I want to call this out, is the service exists, whether you've designed it and been intentional about it or not, right? The service is either bad because no one put any effort into thinking about it, or the service is good and delightful and pleasant, or whatever UX buzzwords we want to use, because someone has made an effort to align all the various things. And so it's happening. That's the thing I think a lot of product teams and other folks, they don't really understand. And a lot of teams, and especially in the States, we don't really have service designers. I don't know of many, to be perfectly honest. I don't know many companies, at least, that do. I know Airbnb, I think, has some service design team. They might call them architects. I'm not sure. But when you've got someone planning that, right? The thing that I see, though, today is those teams either fall under product, like you mentioned, and then they are subject to whatever the product team wants, or they sit completely out of product and have no teeth to enforce anything. And the product team still gets to go do whatever they want.
Yeah.
You know, so I deliver you a bunch of artifacts and do all this work, and you just do nothing with it. And so there is they're not empowered to do anything, to change anything, I guess, right? So that's something I've seen. I'm curious, what's your experience been there? You've done this a lot longer than I have. What have you seen there?
You nailed it in a lot of different ways right there. But that leads me to this. The reason why I'm basically suggesting is the model of the PM, which I think we can all agree. There's two types of PMs. You've got the failed technical PM, the PM that couldn't cut it as a programmer, and so they're now, they're basically a technical cat herder. That's the most common form of PM that I see in large organizations. It's the person, if you go read their bio, they have some coding experience. They started off doing some type of, science or math degree, and they didn't really hack it as a programmer. So now they're basically managing products. And so the other one is, all of a sudden in just the last 2 or 3 years, we're starting to see PMs coming from everywhere, from marketing, from wherever. They're like, oh, you've been at the organization 5 years or 10 years. Let's move you over here to be in control of this massive product. And so that, in my opinion, is even more dangerous. So both of those things don't work. What does work, because service designers look at holistically, they look at the entire business. They zoom way out and do that systems thinking. They understand the organism of the business, but they zoom in to do the systematic thinking and address specific areas of service and service delivery. And the reason why I'm saying what I'm saying is I believe that service designers really should occupy that position or be far more involved in the managing of products and services than a PM. They're more suited to do it. They have way more tools in their tool belt to do it properly. And I feel like that's one of the biggest things that's happening that's wrong with how we're doing business. And I think we can all agree that experiences are not getting better, and that your websites that you interact with, your POS systems, I don't care if it's your television, anything you're touching, it's not getting better. I don't hear anyone saying that. I believe it can, but pretty much everything I interact with on a daily basis is broken. It doesn't work.
And you mentioned something. So this is something that I'm curious to get your thoughts on, and I've seen a lot of people talking about this recently. I've had the same thoughts in my head, but I've seen more and more UX designers realize that they have very little control in their current positions, and so they will then go, and now they're trying to become product managers because they realize that the product teams generally have the budgets, the control, the say, the influence in a lot of organizations. So I've seen that. I've actually thought about that myself, like I don't really care. Call me whatever you want. Let's just build some really great software that gets, that brings value to users. I'm curious your thoughts on that maybe third type of product manager, which is, the UX expat, let's call them that have realized they can do a lot more on that side.
Yeah, I encourage that. I've actually said that in several posts and things on LinkedIn a lot. People who are traditional UXers, because UXers are being pushed out, researchers are being pushed out. I think that traditional UXers and service designers who don't, want to do whatever it is that they're doing, or they're not really happy, we should go more into the PM realm, because you can still use those skill sets, and they're very much in line with what you need to do, and you're probably going to do a hell of a lot better than the two types of PMs that I mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I think is a huge drawback, like both of us are connected to several people that say things like this, and I really want to address this because it's important. When a Figma designer, when someone who does heavy UI production output, says something along the lines of, design leaders need to keep their skills sharp and work in Figma, and they need to be, working in Figma, and this whole notion of the player coach. Those things are symptoms of all of this stuff that we're talking about. And there's a reason why they've gotten rid of design leadership, and there's a reason why they want player coaches in all of those midweight and director roles. All those principal, lead, and director roles, they want player coaches. And the reason why is a lot of the young talent doesn't know what they're doing and isn't very good. And it's okay to say that because it's true.
They need someone to give them hands-on experience. Yeah.
They need someone to manage them and to teach them how to do good, proper UI, how to name things, your layers. We all make jokes about this stuff online. But where I think some of these Figma folks and some of these production folks are getting things twisted is when they say that a design leader's job is not to get down in the weeds and create your design system and create buttons. It's just not. You need to think beyond the button. You need to think beyond the code. And the bottom line is, if you look at the military, generals don't hang out with privates and they don't fight alongside them. And the reason is because of their skill and because of the fact that they've been doing it 20 years, 30 years to be a general. They're better suited being in the war room or the tent, listening to intel, collecting data, looking at maps and saying, hey, we need to move over here, not there. They're coming in from the north, so we need to hit them from the south. That's all strategy. And the thing is, that's what design leaders do. They do that, and they also provide air cover. They also are buffers between you and the business so that designers don't get abused. And so when you say these silly things like, someone with 25, 30 years of experience who's, making $300,000 a year or up, and, they should be down in the weeds playing in Figma, you're foolish. And what you're doing is you're basically disregarding the very thing that you should find the most valuable, which is protecting you and making sure that you do good work and you have a safe place to do that.
You bring up an interesting point too, because there's an opportunity cost always, right?
Yep.
When we're doing that, when we're in Figma as a design leader, when we're figuring out what the border radius of a button should be, or the font, or the color, we're not spending time doing other things like shielding the team from the bullshit and missing out on the meetings and the strategy and influencing people above us to make the right decisions. And I think that drives me crazy. It's like, where are your priorities when you feel like that is something you care about? Now, that said, if you want to figure out how to master Figma on your spare time because you think it's a fun thing to do, maybe it is something you want to do because you feel like you want to be able to utilize that in some way, but when that becomes part of your day-to-day 40-hour-a-week job, I think it says a lot about where your priorities are. I mean, even if you could say, right. And also too, it's like, I've seen the argument that, we need to know what good looks like. So when we hire people, if you're at a director level, you shouldn't be the one making the final decision on who gets hired. Your team should be there on the panel giving input, the people beneath you should be giving you input. It's like, you're not a tyrant, like you mentioned. You're not little Napoleon. I hire him, hire that, her, hire that, blah, blah. It should be your team saying, well, I like them. I did, and I don't know. That just, to me, it says a lot about the culture of that team as well. Like, why do you feel like you have to do the work? You micromanaging them? Like, hire people who can do great work and then teach the rest of the team. It's not your job as a director, a leader, to do the work. I think it's crazy.
A lot of businesses over-indexed on talent, and they overhired the wrong people. And it's okay to say this because it's true. They overhired people who were inexperienced. They gave people principal and lead titles who should have been called juniors. They should have been shadowing someone who is a lead or a principal. And this is a huge issue. And what they've done is they had to
Do you-
bloodlet, and they had to let
Okay,
go a lot of people.
I was going to ask, do you
And
think
what
that's
they've
the
done is
reason why
they've
we saw
stripped
so many
a lot of-
layoffs?
Yeah, and a lot of people who are director levels and people who are principal levels walked away from business. They walked away because what they were being asked to do is, hey, I want you to take $180,000 a year, and I want you to, you're not managing them, but I want you to be head of the community of practice, and I want you to teach these 10 people who don't know anything, who are making 150 or 160. They're making 20 or 30K less
Why
than
do we
you.
give these people a job? Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
meanwhile, you can't assess their skills and you can't fire them if they suck. But you're supposed to just make them as good as you are, and you've got 25 years of experience and have read 100 books and have 3 degrees. Forget that. And so when people were posed with that, and they're like, "Yeah, if you want a salary, that's what we're asking you to do," a whole lot of us walked away and said, "Deuce." You know what I mean? Not interested.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so that just happened. But to back up to what you said, you mentioned earlier about directors and VPs and design leaders getting down in the weeds and playing around in Figma and doing production work. Do you think Frank Lloyd Wright, had a saw and a hammer in his hand? Do you think that Tom Ford, one of the biggest fashion designers, do you think he goes to Indonesia and sits in front of a sewing machine and puts together camisoles and shirts? And
if he does, it's for a PR campaign.
No shit.
It's the post on Instagram or Twitter. That's why.
Do you think Martin Scorsese edits his own shit in Final Cut Pro and making the flames look right in After Effects? No, he doesn't. He doesn't even hold a camera anymore. He stands next to the dude that holds the camera. And that is the whole point, is they've decimated this leadership. And the reason they did it is so that they could bully production workers around and treat designers like programmers, which is trade workers. And the thing is that's not what research and design is about. It's knowledge work, and it's important, and it's not ditch digging. It's not, hey, go build something. You know what I mean? It's go figure what we need to build. Figure out where
Make sure we're building the right
problem
thing.
is. Yeah, because 9 times out of 10, when you're presented with a problem, if it doesn't have good problem definition, or the opportunity hasn't been defined by a portfolio manager, and you don't, or you haven't addressed, hey, this issue is worth $20 million to the business, or $5 million, or whatever. So we know what we're looking at. If you haven't done that sort of stuff, you're going to have a problem. And what ends up happening is 90% of the time, we end up going to do some discovery, and we determine that, hey, that problem that you said was the problem isn't the problem at all. It's actually this thing over here that we need to go solve. And what's happened is, in the last 5 years, that has gone out the window, and people are no longer doing that. You're no longer pushing back on the business. You're no longer saying, hey, this is a communications or a brand problem, or hey, this issue that, you keep talking about us having bad NPS or CSAT scores or whatever, but the real problem is it's because of our content, because we have different voices and different writers and there's no content leadership. So these problems are so pervasive because we're getting rid of the design hierarchy, and we don't understand division of labor.
All right. So you mentioned a lot of stuff here. Obviously things are broken, but you've got some ideas, some things that we could do to actually, how to fix it. So we talked a lot about the bullshit, a lot about the problems. Let's talk a little bit about your ideas, your vision for how we could go about improving our lot as a design community. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I love it. So you mentioned before, like when we were originally going to talk, you were saying, hey, what's the difference between CX, EX, and UX? And let's talk about that stuff. And why does service design matter? Well, the thing is we really speak 3 different languages in design and in business, right? There's 3 different languages. You've got your customer experience. That's the concerning ourselves with customers, consumers, members, their needs, their goals, experiences, and putting them top of mind. Those inform our customer or user requirements, right? Business needs, understanding the direction of the business, the vision, the differentiation of us between our competition, revenue, growth, P&L, all that stuff. North Star, visioning, all of that stuff are blue chips, are OKRs that the business cares about. What we're doing that the business really cares about as far as growth. That informs our business requirements, product needs, all of those two things distill down through great problem statements into understanding the product in terms of roadmaps, features, workflows, epics, stories, all of that, releases. And so that informs product requirements. When you merge all of those together and we put our potential customers and members, or consumers, customers, members first, and align their needs with the vision of the business, we can create product and service brand loyalty with new products, new services, refine existing ones. Unifying all three of those things that I just mentioned is exactly what human-centered service design is about. And no other part of the business is addressing holistically the systems thinking of the organism of the business. This is the job of service design. So to bring service design up under a product person and to say, hey, go make my speculation or my hypothesis true by creating a fake future journey map or blueprint, that's not what our jobs are. You know what I mean? And I think the answer to all of this, and the answer to all of the things that we've been talking about, is really putting customers first and putting our employees first and our team members first. Because the truth is, every one of the great design-led companies that gets so much respect and is constantly at the top of the list, I don't care if it's Discount Tire, Toyota, Apple, all of these companies that are heavy Airbnb, that are heavy design-led companies. These are beloved companies, and they're companies that are super profitable. Some of them are the biggest in their categories. And so this idea that design needs to prove itself and get a seat at the table and needs to understand business, that couldn't be dumber. That could not be more false. That whole narrative is a joke. And the thing is, when we understand our vision and values, and employees and team members are proactively involved in talking to customers, bringing customers into co-design sessions, this is what human-centered design is. But the thing is when you clip that whole front end of that process, and you reduce the ability to do qualitative and good design and interviews, you just start making junk and start making speculating. And I think that's our answer. Our answer is we need to have service design needs to be more embedded. It needs to be topmost and top level, and we need to address the business, and we need to govern products and services with service design.
So let me ask you this. I was going to ask you, all right, you've got, someone gives Thomas Wilson, I don't know, $1 billion, million, 500 million, whatever, to start your own company. What does that org structure look like to you? Is it more flat? Is it more like service design has some type of, teeth, some kind of power, some kind of say, a veto? Because what I think about often is, when I used to work in advertising, the brand, we got to pass this by branding. We got to pass it by marketing. And 9 times out of 10, they'd be like, nope, can't do it. Nope, not going to pass. And it's funny because I kind of immediately think about service design, like, well, let's pass it by the service design team or something. Does this pass the overall, service blueprint or whatever it is that we want to compare it to? I'm curious. You get a bunch of money, you start your own company, a service company. What does that org look like, and where does service design fit into that versus even maybe something like UX? Where does UX fit in?
I'm gonna borrow a page from what you just said. Most people love to badmouth agencies, but let me tell you why they've been around for hundreds of years, and let me tell you why they're not going anywhere. I don't care if it's Wonderman or Y&R, whatever. These agencies aren't going anywhere. Razorfish, Fjord. The bottom line with what you just mentioned about agencies is there's hierarchy there. And so if agencies fail, and they don't, they don't fail 95% of the time, which is how often product fails. It fails 70 to 75%. You mentioned you had a post the other day, and I was commenting on it. Those numbers come out annually from Gartner, from Capgemini, from Forrester. They come out from everybody, puts those numbers out, and they're the same for the last 10, 15 years. So agencies don't fail 95% of the time. If they did, they wouldn't have any clients. They do fail. Right. But let me tell you something that they started doing 20 years ago that you probably know about, which is they started getting compensation for value-added compensation, and basically set metrics. Okay, you're going to pay us $1 million to go do this big campaign and this push and, change perception. But if it hits these numbers and these metrics, we want a 25% or a 10% sweetener at the end of it. And so when you start getting paid based on performance metrics, all of a sudden shit starts to change a little bit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think we should start getting these numbers and looking at these metrics and, hey, you like Teresa Torres and Marty Kagan, buddy? Let's, if you're failing 95% of the time, then we're going to switch it up a little bit. And we're not going to do your idea here, which is, just get rid of research, get rid of design, and have the PMs and the technicals sitting in on the interviews, which is ridiculous.
And let the data speak for itself. Let the data inform how we operate. And it's crazy to me, but like I think one of the answers to me, and you just said this exactly, is how many times have we started products or features or whatever, projects, whatever you want to call them, and had absolutely no idea how to measure whether or not the thing was a success at the end. The outcome is just features being released.
That's what's happening.
That's right, exactly. So we're always measured on output. We're never measured on any kind of outcome. And this is something our team at work, we have just recently got an analytics platform we're using that we're trying to enable this. Every single time someone asks the UX team to do some work, the question is, what's the outcome? What are the KPIs? How are we measuring this? How do we know if it's successful? The other thing that I think is amazing, and we never do this internally in enterprise, at least I never have, maybe some teams do, agencies, before they start any amount of work, they do a brief. They sign off on the brief. And it specifically says...
It's rooted in metrics. It's rooted in data.
Exactly, right. And at the end, you design a thing and you say... they say, I don't like it. And you say, but it doesn't matter if you like it. It's designed to the brief. And we've met the outcomes and the requirements that we laid out in the brief that you agreed to. And so it doesn't matter if that product manager has a certain opinion or there's some subjective thing. It's all about objective data telling us whether or not this thing was successful. And at the end of the day, someone should be held accountable. And if those teams that are making bad decisions are held accountable, you better believe they're going to stop making those bad decisions. Because they like money and they like getting paid.
No shit. I agree 100%. And if you look at the hierarchy of design, and we can look at other parts of the business, but if you look at the hierarchy of design, you have your graphic designers and your production artists and people who do that kind of work. Then above them, you have some type of art director or some type of lead. Above that, you have an associate creative director. Above that, you have a creative director. Then you have a chief creative officer, a CDO or something, above that. And all the way up to the top, the person whose name is on the wall half the time is either a writer or a creative director. They're not a salesperson. They're definitely not a technical or So this is the thing is I think we've lost our way. And I'm glad that you brought up GE because I just see GE blowing up, man. And I love the fact that they're paying so much attention to design, especially with GE Healthcare. I follow a lot of people that are at your sister.
They've always done a good job of that, actually. I work for aerospace, so it's different from healthcare, and we're actually totally separate companies now. As of last year, it still says GE, but they have split off completely. So they are completely wholly owned or wholly separate company, or whatever the language is. But really they've always done a really good job. Yeah.
They're really progressive.
Aerospace has done good too. Yeah. But we've actually just recently, I'm excited to see this, but I'm not trying to sell GE or anything, but we've got a new customer experience team. We are working closely with them. We're talking about outcomes. I've seen now, it's funny because those little LinkedIn AI articles, I start to see people from GE adding stuff to those too now. I'm like, I don't like those little AI generated articles, but I'm glad they're at least thinking about it. People high up there. So, but anyway, so let me ask you this: when you think about service design, and I want to talk a little bit about this because I think this is important. But I've heard a lot of people talk about service design being a subset of UX. And I don't mean to laugh when I say that, but like it just I giggle because I think about CX and service design, UX, and how it all kind of fits in my head. And I can't help but giggle about it. But when you think about service design versus something like UX, how do you see those two working together in an ideal way? And what does that solution look like from your perspective?
Well, UX comes in at a specific stage gate, and that's at the micro design level, whereas service design is far more macro and higher above. Yeah, like I said initially, we zoom in and out. But at a high level, service design spans everything. I've done really, really great service design jobs that were super successful, and all it was going and unpacking specific standard operating procedures at the call center, us looking at call center scripts, and just by changing these things, like giant metric boosts and lifts that occur just by fixing the way that we design these things and the language of it and how we present it and things like that. That has nothing to do with UI. So the thing is
Right.
when we start talking about UX design, we're talking about digital products. And like you mentioned earlier, and like I've said a couple of times, is the majority of the things that are wrong with the business are not in your app. They're not in your website. That is a part of it, but it's a small part usually, unless all you are is a startup and an app. If you're Uber, if you're Slack, if you're Sketch or Figma, hey, I get it. All you are is an app. Okay.
Yeah.
So everything should be requirements gathering, and you should be product first all day. Nice talking to you. But if you're GE, if you're United Healthcare, if you're Amazon, no, you shouldn't.
See, but even still, I feel like there's still a level of customer support, service, FAQs, like when I see a bug, what do I do? Who do I contact? How do I report it? When I'm, Uber, I have an issue, and then there's also too, Uber, it's not just the app that I use to book the ride. It's the app that the drivers use to find the people that need the ride. Right? It's the system to get paid and the system to add get your tax information and all that other stuff. The support team probably has their own systems that Uber's building in-house. And so, yes, the Uber product is the thing that we sell commercially, but the service is all of those things together. And just like you mentioned, the best companies put their people first, and hopefully, I assume Uber, Lyft, all those companies are creating great experiences for the drivers, for the employees, for the people who work there, to be able to do the things they need to do to provide the support, the service to the other employees, to the drivers who are technically, I guess, not employees according to legal contracts. But, so like it's even when I just have a single app, that I'm selling, that thing is there because I find value in the service that it provides me. I'm able to do a thing. Right. And it doesn't matter and everything's a service. So like, if I can't do the thing I needed to do, it's no longer valuable to me. And sometimes that thing may not be an app, and I think about like Airbnb, like that service. It's like, what happens when I get to the house and it's not the way I want it to be? Or, who do I contact? How do I get my money back? All those things to me are just beyond the app. And to me, that's where service design really shines. And the really great companies that do it really well, let those teams connect those dots and enforce those things across the board.
You just mentioned Airbnb, and Airbnb is an excellent example. This new company called Linear is a good example. There's a bunch of them. But if you understand how Airbnb works, Airbnb is all about journey ops. They're all about journeys, okay? And so when we unpack those, when we have a specific persona or archetype, a person who's having a problem with their house, whatever, and we understand the scenario that they're in, and we look at those key interactions and behaviors, those touch points, right? And we understand the mindsets and the emotions and the things that they're going through and the different phase. When we understand evidencing and looking at evidence and looking at the timeline and unpacking all of that and the different channels that we've identified, that's when we can provide better and more unique and powerful experiences. That's when we take the persona or the archetype, turn it into the journey, turn that top part of the journey into the top part of the blueprint. And what the blueprint tells us, the service blueprint, is it tells us who the service customers are, who the service users are, the front stage service employees, the backstage service employees, partner service employees, touch points, time, narrative, value, all of that stuff. And so when you understand all of that and you understand all the people, places, partners, props, and processes, when you understand all of that stuff, you're able to look at those moments that matter. Are they unique moments that are happening? Like we look at a problem. If it's a problem for the customer, okay. If it's a small problem for the business or a large problem for the business, okay. But when the problem lines up with a serious problem with the customer and a serious problem with the business, we need to look at that moment. Is it friction? Is it toxic to the service? Is it breaking it down? or is it are they a moment that matter that's important, meaning it's a unique or high value or operational moment that matters? Because when you unpack that stuff, we want to keep doing that. We want to keep doing those things. We want to double down on those things. We don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. And so for having these moments of goodness in the midst of a poor experience or a poor service delivery, we want to make sure not to step on those, right? And so that's what service design is all about, is looking everything holistically with all of the players, all of the things. Think in terms of like a cell or a nucleus of a cell and all the little things, the dendrites and things that come off of it. That's what the organism of a business is. It's all of those things that have dependencies on one another, relationships one another, and you understand the connective tissue between all of those things. If you're just talking about how your UI or your buttons or your design system looks and your app or your website, that is micro, man. That is surface design, and that is down in the weeds. That is like specific. So that's why service design cannot be considered by anyone to be a subset of UX. It's a joke. Because service is big like the sky and UX is small and micro.
Yeah. So I love service blueprints, and I find them also to be just a fantastic way to show very clearly all of the various systems that a user might be getting into, right? And it's a great opportunity to show silos. It's a great opportunity to show where systems don't connect, but they should. It's a great opportunity to show opportunities for, streamlining systems, combining systems, showing where data can talk in the background, where we might need to create APIs to pass from one product to another. It's a great opportunity for us to look and say, why do we have two products? Why isn't this just one interface, right? Or can we start using microservices or micro apps or something to start planning that? But in order for microservices, micro apps, APIs to work, there's got to be a strategy. There's got to be a plan, around that. There's got to be some vision on how they all will connect in the long term, because usually we don't have money to do it all at once. So we have to plan over time, and you can't just take Agile and just tinker here, tinker there, and expect 5 years from now to have it all connect when there was no plan or no vision. So I think there's a really great way to, I know how you feel about Agile. That's a whole nother topic. But, that's kind of one of the things, though. I feel like when you have that service design up at the top, you can dictate, or not dictate, I hate to use the word dictate, but you can influence, those teams and say, you can't use just some tinkering Agile process here because they have to all connect. And maybe there's some specific technical problem you have to solve. You can tinker there. But this can't be a thing where we're just tinkering with features, because we know at the top what we need to do and what's broken and what we have to fix. So I really love service blueprints. And the other thing I want to say, like, there's one takeaway, maybe a couple takeaways, that any junior designer, career shift, or somebody who is just starting out in UX design takes away from this conversation. I want them to understand that the thing they're building, they have to understand the larger context. It can't just be, I need to put an input field or a button on a screen. Why are they going there? Why? What are they going to do after that button is pressed? And then what do they expect to happen? And, maybe they are in a single app, and if you're a junior designer, you probably don't have a lot to say, but you can at least start talking about it and familiarize yourself with the larger system, so that when you make your own little design decisions in that micro level, it's informed by the larger context. Which I think a lot of people coming out of boot camps, they just think design systems, my color's blue, my font's this, the spacing is that, here's my component. But, that's all well and good, and I think those things are very important. I don't want to dismiss those. But you have, a design system only allows you to build the thing correctly if you know what you're building in the first place. Right. And that's the thing I think that's just so important to take away.
And one of the things, that's an excellent takeaway. One of the understanding context is super critical. But one of the things that we didn't really talk about, but I just want to mention really quick, is part of the work of the service designer, actually the bulk of the work, is understanding power and influence. It's understanding those silos that you talked about. Yeah. It's understanding people. It's stakeholder management. All right. It isn't just about blueprints and journeys, man. I can teach anyone to do decent blueprints and journeys. A lot of people do them poorly, but I can teach that pretty fast. The part that's really hard and the part that really requires a lot of nuance and a lot of care is understanding politics and understanding power. Who's in a position of power? Who can kibosh your job and just blow it out of the water? Because what happens is you end up pissing someone off, and someone makes the right phone call, and your $2 million project just went in the toilet.
Yeah,
and you're getting cold shouldered, and you're getting put in a padded room real quick, and you're like, why is this happening to me?
So,
it's like pissed off the wrong person, and you didn't invite the right person into the right meeting.
Yeah, at the right time.
Understanding those things, that's all part of service design. It's all about shaking hands and kissing babies and politicking and understanding that stuff.
That is something that the whole reason I started this podcast was to talk about all those skills, I don't think they're soft skills. I think a lot of these are really actual hard skills you need to have.
That's a hard skill you have to have.
Yeah, but like when you think about UX design or designers in general, and they go to a boot camp, they learn how to use Figma, they learn how to write a user story. Yeah. Well, so like that's the thing. Like for me, this whole podcast started, and this is something that like I tell people this all the time. But you cannot build great software without great relationships. It just cannot happen. You cannot build something unless you work with the team and you understand. You do that stakeholder management. You understand who influences who, how, when, how they connect, who their allies are, who they don't like, those kind of like the last thing you want is to try to build an ally with some enemy of an important person. Maybe you need the ally, but like also build that ally on the other side. But understanding that is so critical. This is something I used to get shit from my engineering friends. I used to say like, software in theory is easy, right? You type in some code, you do it correctly, there's no typos, and you get exactly what you wanted, right? You get the output that you typed in. What makes software hard are the people and the relationships and the agendas and the politics and all that stuff. That makes software really hard. And you could design the most amazing interface in the world and it could solve all the users' problems, but if you cannot figure out how to get that thing built and shipped and pushed to production, it was all a giant waste of everyone's time.
Yeah.
And that is really, at the end of the day, everything we're talking about.
There's a lot of stars that have to align, including the marketing and branding and positioning and like how it's sold, your pricing tiers. You could go make the most kick-ass app or piece of software in the world, but if your pricing tiers are stupid and people don't like it because of the way you're positioning, the 2 or 3 different tiers that you're trying to get people in, if it doesn't make sense, your software will fail right off the bat.
Yeah, absolutely. So, awesome, man. I love it. All right. Well, we've had you for a while. We talked for a little bit now. I know we could probably keep talking for hours and hours if someone let us. But I've got a few questions that I like to ask all of my, actually before I do that. So we talked a lot. We talked a little bit of time. Anything else we talked about the relationship? I know we could probably talk for another 2 hours about the relationship stuff and the stakeholder management on its own. Anything else before we get out of here you think is really important, some key takeaways you want some of those designers listening out there to know?
You mentioned before that you really cared a lot about young designers and you wanted this podcast to help educate young people that are coming into the business. And I would like to just share a really quick message. If you're in this business, if you went to the boot camp, if you went to the crappy school that you feel like you got ripped off at, and you did it because you want to change people's lives and you want to make people's lives better, good on you. Now start reading books and start following people like me, Jeremy, especially if you care about CX, please follow Debbie Levitt, follow my friend Augie Ray. Yeah. If you care about service design, follow people like Adam St. John Lawrence, Mark Stickdorn, Service Design Network, especially Morgan Miller, one of my favorite people in the world. But what I really want to say to you is check yourself, like search yourself. Did you see the tattoos and the stickies and the blue hair and the and the fun colors and emojis, and then hear that people are making 150 to 250K a year? And is that why you're in this business? Because if it is, you should go back to whatever it was that you were doing before, because there's a lot of you here. And the bottom line is, if you don't want to get abused, if you don't want to be in a thankless job, if you don't want to get your heart stepped on at least once a week, by caring so much about users that you're on the verge of crying because you can't talk to them and you feel like you're doing the wrong thing. If you're not driven by that and that those aren't feelings that you get on a regular basis, this business probably isn't for you. Am I a gatekeeper? You bet. 100%.
And just like Darren Hood says, there ain't nothing wrong with gatekeepers, man. Like everybody bashes gatekeepers. I feel like we could use more gatekeepers.
Me, Mike Montiero, I'm telling you, the bottom line is if you're in this because you want to create things for people and solve problems and you want to change people's lives, you're in the right business. But it might get hairy. It might get scary, and you might get abused. So just get ready.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, you're right. Especially, you start stepping on some of those little, you go over the border on some of those little fiefdoms. Those little fiefdoms. You cross the border accidentally. Woo, watch out. Watch out.
I've done it.
All right. Awesome. Yeah. So, Thomas, I know you got a lot of resources. If you want to send me some resources, we'll include them in the show notes. You mentioned a couple. One I really like is, I think it's Mark Fontaine's got the Service Design Podcast. That's a really good,
right.
If you're in a podcast, that's a really good podcast. I think you mentioned the Service Design Network. He runs, if I'm not mistaken, he runs a Service Design Network, which is, am I wrong about that?
He's part of it. He's a member of the Service Design Network.
Okay. For some reason, I thought he started. Okay. So he's a member, but yeah.
Burgett Major and a bunch of other people are part of the Service Design Network, and actually there are chapters in every city and country.
Yeah, cool. Right on. Yeah, and you mentioned Debbie Levitt. We actually had her on not long ago. We talked about critical thinking. We didn't really talk about CX very much, but I'd love to, at some point, maybe we'll get her back on. She's got an awesome book, Customers. I got it right here on my bookshelf. Customers Know You Suck. That's a really great book.
I love that
it
book.
Talks all about CX. So if you're, I think that's a really good primer too for CX if you're not really familiar with what CX is and you've only ever heard the term UX and CX is kind of something like, what the hell is CX? It's not the same just because there's an X at the end. It's more than just UX. So go check that out. That's awesome. All right, Thomas. So we've got a couple of questions I like to ask all my guests to help all my listeners out there get to know my guests a little bit better. You got some time to stick around, answer some silly questions.
Let's do it.
All right, man. First up, what's your favorite non-design book?
Man and
His
Symbols,
so this might be hard.
by Carl Jung.
All right, Carl Jung does some philosophy stuff. I love that, man. What do you like most about that one? Why pick that one?
Well, it's an interesting book that talks a lot about symbolism, and it talks about things that permeate culture, human culture, and symbols. And this, him and Joseph Campbell both are people that I've read a ton about, and I've read all their books, and I just really love the idea of associating our belief systems with symbolism, with marks, brands, logos, iconography, glyphs. I just think that stuff's fascinating. So
it is, yeah. And psychology in general, anything psychology, absolutely 100%, is tangentially related to what we do as UX designers. I mean, if you can't understand how people think and stuff, you're going to have a very hard time designing an experience for them. I love it.
Right.
All right. What is your favorite non-design podcast? If you don't really listen to podcasts, maybe YouTube series or something, or TV show, whatever. I don't know.
I only listen to design podcasts or research podcasts. I would say the only other podcast that I probably listen to sometimes would be like something like NPR. That's a terrible answer.
I'll throw you a curveball, or I'll throw you a softball question. What's your favorite design podcast?
I like Mark Fontaine's show. This is that Service Design show. I like that one a lot. I like NNG's. Nielsen Norman Group has a lot of great content on their podcast. I've listened to probably 10 or 15 of Darren Hood's podcasts. I don't 100% agree with everything that he says, but I agree with a whole lot of what he says.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Those are some solid choices there. Nielsen Norman Group, obviously great. I mean, everybody's hopefully familiar. If you're a UX designer and haven't heard Nielsen Norman Group, I don't know what you're doing. All right, what is your favorite meal?
Really, that's a good one, and it's hard because I really like Ethiopian, Thai, and Indian. Ooh. Those are my favorite. Ethiopian, Thai, or Indian. One of those three. It's a toss-up.
Hell yeah! I'm going to India in December, dude. I'm so excited. I've never been.
You're gonna have a lot of fun, man.
I can't wait, dude. The food, I'm so excited about the food. Yeah, well, I guess when this comes out, it'll be a January. I would have been back already, I guess. But man, I'm so excited. The Indian food. Growing up in New Orleans, everybody talks about how good New Orleans food is. but pretty much the only food that's good in New Orleans is the New Orleans food.
Cajun
we don't
food,
really do
Creole.
Yeah, we don't. Yeah, exactly. We don't really Louisiana food. We don't really do like ethnic food very well in New Orleans, you know. And there was not a lot of Indian options down there. And moving up to Cincinnati, though, man, I've been impressed. We've had a lot of really good restaurants up here, really good Indian restaurants. But yeah, I'm gonna go get some Thai for lunch, man. I got a new Thai place opened up down the street, so that's gonna be my thing. I'm gonna go get some Thai food here in a little bit.
Get Penang curry, get some Penang curry, and get you some coconut ice cream.
Woo! Yeah, you're right. All right, what's your favorite vacation spot?
It used to be Mexico, but now it's Ireland.
Ireland, cool. What part?
Southwest Ireland.
Okay. Any particular city or town?
Yeah, my family is from between Galway and Oranmore, and so I really like that area. It's beautiful, and it just has a special place in my heart. I love Irish people.
Hell yeah, man! Does your family still live there? Do you still have family there? No cousins or anything.
No.
Oh, that'd be cool.
I do.
Going back.
I actually got into a taxi, and the guy that was driving was a distant relative. And I went to eat at a restaurant, and I told them who I was, and I said, "This is my family surname was Burke." And so all the Burkes are in that area are descendants of William de Burgh. And so
When did your family leave Ireland? Did they come in like 100 years ago, like several hundred years ago, or like how long have they been in the States?
After the hunger, the fake famine.
Okay, so like that was what,
really
18?
Yeah, 100.
When was that?
18 years ago.
100. Yeah. So you probably still have like third cousins, fourth cousins, maybe something like. Yeah, that's awesome, man. That's really cool. I love it. I love that's the cool thing about America is like everybody, you know, melting pot. Obviously, like our families like from all over the world, and like we still have like all these people there that we're related to that like completely different cultures and language and everything else is pretty fascinating. I love thinking about that stuff.
Right.
All right. What is your favorite design tool that is not Figma? You might. I don't know how much you use Figma. But
yes.
I ask everybody this.
Illustrator.
Ooh, I love Illustrator.
Miro is not really a design tool, but man, I love Miro. But Illustrator is probably my favorite design tool.
Right on, man. Yeah, I would consider Miro a design. I use Miro. That's my tool of choice. I was actually in a workshop the other day, and there's a new. I don't know if it's new, but I just discovered it at least, like a wireframing kit that they have. It's like part of like, it's not even a plugin. It's like part of their stuff. And I was designing like a screen and stuff for this workshop, you know, like all drag and drop, and like, it's pretty cool how it works actually. It's like, you can change components around, toggle things on and off, change stuff. It's pretty sweet. Activated states and all that stuff. Anyway, pretty sweet stuff. All right, Thomas, that's it, man. That's everything we got for today. Before we get out of here, why don't you give yourself a plug? Let everybody know where they can find you, all your writings, all your stuff, even your band, where they can find you on Spotify, all that stuff, man.
Oh, you can find me on LinkedIn, and I'm easy to find. I'm usually talking the most shit about product first and those types of mindsets. And yeah, thanks for plugging my music. I don't normally tell people about it. Just a handful of friends on LinkedIn, but you can look at my Spotify. You can search Saint Thomas X. That's my music.
Yeah, that's really cool stuff. Hell yeah, man. I don't know if you knew this. I had a conversation with Debbie Levitt a while back, and she used to do like prog goth prog goth operas. Man. Yeah. So you guys could do a collaboration. Can she? I asked her. I actually, I think was it? I can't remember if it was a conversation I had with her or it was something I saw online. But she did something. I can't remember. I'm not even going to try to remember what it was. But it was something she was singing something. Anyway, yeah, I don't know. You guys could do a collab.
Karaoke. She goes to karaoke a lot.
Oh, dude, that's what I'm talking about, man. I love it. We actually were trying to get her to come in to GE for work. Ended up not working out. We couldn't get the budget for it. But next time, if we do, I'll take her. We'll go out for karaoke afterwards. There's a couple good spots in Cincinnati, man. I love it. It's funny. I have a list on my phone because like when you go out to karaoke, you're usually drinking and you forget the songs. So I got a list I keep on my phone. So anytime we go out, I got that list. I'm like, oh, there's the 10, 15 songs I can pull from. I know by heart, It's kind of sad. I'm sad.
It's cool. It's cooler if you're drunk to just make up words. Just make up really crazy words. Super perverted or profanity. Just
The less
say
you know, the
crazy
better.
shit.
That's
Yeah.
true. When else are you gonna? Why not? Well, I mean, isn't that what karaoke's for? All right, Thomas. Awesome, man. Well, thanks for coming on. Appreciate you sharing all your hot takes. I think this is some good stuff. I think it's really important for people to know. Thanks again, man. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Jay, man. Have a great
Yeah.
day and a great weekend.
Right on.